Good afternoon, everyone. The meeting for the Assembly Committee on Growth and Infrastructure will now come to order. Will the committee secretary please call the roll?
Assemblywoman Brown May.
Here.
Assemblyman Ellison.
Present.
Assemblyman Levitt.
Here.
Assemblyman Miller.
Here.
Assemblywoman Peters.
Here.
Assemblyman Roberts. Assemblywoman Summers Armstrong.
Here.
Assemblyman Watts.
Here.
Assemblyman Wheeler.
Here.
Assemblyman Yeager.
Here.
Chairman Roe Moreno.
And I am here. Assemblyman Roberts is making a bill presentation in another committee. As soon as he arrives, I will let our committee secretary know. I'd like to welcome everyone to today's meeting on Assembly Committee on Growth and Infrastructure. Today we will hear 3 bills, but first the committee will introduce several bill draft requests that we've received literally in the last few hours. So for the public who are watching, the building still remains closed. However, you are welcome to participate by phone or submitting your written testimony or opinions to us. We will be able to take any written documents up to 48 hours after this meeting. If you are going to testify on the bill, we ask that you limit your comments to 3 minutes or less, leaving time for everyone that has an opinion to share their opinion. If you'd like to make public comment, the public comment will be at the end of the entire meeting. For the members on the committee, I ask that you keep your cameras on and your mics muted so that we can keep the noise level down so we have an accurate record for our minutes. So before we start with the agenda, we will go to our Bdr introductions. And I'd like to remind our committee that voting in favor of the BDRs that we're introducing today does not imply a commitment to support of the measure later. The first BDR for introduction is S458, sponsored by the Legislative Committee on Energy. The measure requires the Department of Transportation to establish a working group to study certain issues related to transportation. May I have a motion for committee introduction?
So moved. Vice Chair Watts.
I have a first from Vice Chair Watts. May I get a second? A second from Assemblyman Wheeler. Any discussion on the matter? Seeing none, Madam Secretary, may I have a roll call vote of the members?
Assemblywoman Brown May.
Yes.
Assemblyman Ellison.
Yes.
Assemblyman Levitt.
Yes.
Assemblyman Miller.
Yes.
Assemblywoman Peters.
Yes.
Assemblyman Roberts. Assemblywoman Summers Armstrong.
Yes.
Assemblyman Watts.
Yes.
Assemblyman Wheeler.
Yes.
Assemblyman Yeager.
Yes.
Chairman Roe Moreno.
And I am a yes. That motion passes. Our second BDR is 51-1022, sponsored by this committee, which revises provisions governing fuel. May I have a motion from the committee for the committee bill introduction?
So moved. Vice Chair Watts.
I have a first from Vice Chair Watts. May I get a
Second.
second? I have a second from Assemblyman Wheeler. Any discussion on the measure? Seeing none, I'll ask for a roll call vote.
Assemblywoman Brown May.
Yes.
Assemblyman Ellison.
Yes. Sorry.
Assemblyman Levitt,
Yes.
Assemblyman Miller,
Yes.
Assemblywoman Peters,
Yes.
Assemblyman Roberts, Assemblywoman Summers Armstrong,
Yes.
Assemblyman Watts,
Yes.
Assemblyman Wheeler,
Yes.
Assemblyman Yeager,
Yes.
Chairman Rowe Moreno.
And I am a yes. And that takes us to our final BDR for today. The number is 43-1050, also sponsored by this committee. And it revises provisions governing motor vehicles. May I have a motion for the committee bill introduction?
So moved, Vice Chair Watts.
Thank you, Vice Chair Watts. May I get a second? I have a second from Assemblyman Wheeler. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, may I get a roll call vote, please?
Assemblywoman Brown May,
Yes.
Assemblyman Ellison,
Yes.
Assemblyman Levitt,
Yes.
Assemblyman Miller,
Yes.
Assemblywoman Peters,
Yes.
Assemblyman Roberts, Assemblywoman Summers Armstrong,
Yes.
Assemblyman Watts,
Yes.
Assemblyman Wheeler,
Yes.
Assemblyman Yeager,
Yes.
Chairman Rowe Moreno.
And I am a yes. Thank you, committee. So we will move on to the next item on our agenda, and that is bill hearings. I'll open the hearing for Assembly Bill 281, which will be presented by our fellow committee member, Assemblyman Miller. Whenever you are ready, Assemblyman Miller, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Madam Chair. For the record, I am Assemblyman C.H. Miller, representing Assembly District 7 within Clark County. I'm here to represent Assembly Bill 281 for your consideration. But I'm gonna give you a little background first. Now, since 1931, Nevada has required that the identity of anyone leasing a vehicle for less than 31 days be kept as public record, open to inspection by any person, along with the specific duration of the short-term lease. Originally, the records required by Nevada revised statutes 482.315 were to be inspected by the Department of Motor Vehicles. In 2003, AB 267 transferred this responsibility to the Department of Taxation as part of its responsibilities to track the collection of sales tax and allow the director of the DMV to be able to inspect these records upon request. Retaining records of the identity of short-term lessees of vehicles and the duration of short-term leases is necessary for taxation, law enforcement, insurance, and other liability reasons. Existing law makes it a misdemeanor for any short-term lessor of vehicles to fail to create, possess, or make these records available for inspection when asked. In other words, any person is able to inspect the personal information of a short-term lessee of a vehicle, and it is a misdemeanor offense for a short-term lessor of motor vehicles to refuse such a request, according to regulations enacted in the Nevada Administrative Code 482.286. The retention period for these records is 4 years. Now, once personal identifiable information is obtained by a bad actor, there is little anyone can do to stop the misuse or sale of this information and the potential for harm and frustration to the person whose information was compromised. Assembly Bill 281 removes the ability for any person to inspect records containing the identities of short-term lessees of vehicles and retains the ability for records to be inspected by the Department of Motor Vehicles and Taxation, along with certain local government employees. This will balance the need for accurate record keeping with the need to protect the personal identifiable information of short-term vehicle lessees. Madam Chair and fellow members of the committee, this concludes my introduction. I will now turn things over to Matthew Walker, Director of Greenberg Traurig, I always say that wrong, LLP, please forgive me, who will walk us through this bill and the proposed amendments. Then we'll pass it to Mr. Keith Duffy, who oversees risk management in Nevada for Enterprise Rent-A-Car for additional comment. After these gentlemen conclude, we will be ready for questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Assemblyman Miller. Matt Walker on behalf of Enterprise. For the record, Chairman Moreno and committee members, we're really pleased to be with you today to present Assembly Bill 281. Assembly Bill 281 essentially allows for best practice in safety and security, and also just general efficiency for business and governments by allowing for digital storage of various records that are required to be kept pursuant to NRS 482. So I'm going to walk quickly through both sections and then address the issue that Assemblyman Miller flagged in terms of who is able to access these records under 482 through 15. So Section 1 deals with the records, certain records of short-term lessors, and again allows for them to store those records digitally. It's notable here that it's not required to store them digitally. This is enabling for businesses only, and then make those records available when they do store them electronically within 3 business days. We did stumble upon an issue in 482-315 and the research for this piece of legislation, and that's when the ability of short-term lessors to pass through their governmental services tax, or car registration tax as we typically think of it. It was codified to say that anybody could request these records, and we think that it's much more appropriate for the safety and security of our customers and for just our general business records to ensure that every regulator who has legitimate need to access these records has access, but maybe close the loop a little bit so that just general members of the public or competitors aren't requesting records in an appropriate manner. Moving on quickly to Section 2 of Assembly Bill 281, this deals with the ability of car dealers to store records required to be retained by 482-3263, also in an electronic format, and make them available within 3 business days upon request from a regulator. So here again, I want to emphasize that this is enabling businesses to store these records. If there's a business that likes their paper and likes their filing cabinets, they're certainly not going to be forced to transition to digital records should this bill be passed. Lastly, I want to emphasize 2 key points that the Assemblyman made as part of his initial presentation. One is that there are significant penalties associated with failing to maintain these records or to provide them to regulators in a timely manner. And we certainly don't see anything in this bill interfering with that existing authority under 482-315 or 482-555 for there to be significant sanctions associated with not providing those records. And we certainly want that to continue, although they may be stored in a digital format. Lastly, I'll just say that, again, this is best practice from a business standpoint and from a security of information standpoint, is instead of having dispersed records in physical formats spread throughout the state at the location where business is taking place, to be able to centralize them and keep them in digital format certainly matches best practice. If anybody has any questions about how that looks on the ground with today's requirement to store records in physical form, or how this process would work in digitizing these records, I do have Keith Duffy, who is the head of risk management for Enterprise here in Nevada, available for any questions or answers the committee might have. So I will go ahead and rest there and stand ready for any questions this committee might have. And thank you for the opportunity to present today.
Thank you, Assemblyman Miller and Mr. Walker, for the presentation. Members, I was not sure if you guys we're finished. So that's why I hesitated. Members, do you have any questions for the Assemblyman or his co-presenters on AB 281?
I have a question, Madam Chair.
Assemblywoman Peters, go ahead.
Thank you. So I'm really curious about the history of this legislation and why these records were supposed to be public. And I was trying to think about what it would be that would like obligate them to have these records public. And the couple that came up to mind for me were the variety of insurance involved with short-term leases, right? Whether it's through the leasing agency or through the private party carrying their own insurance. And then the other is law enforcement. So in the case of an accident or an incident where a leasee car is involved, would they have to get a warrant under this new language? And were they allowed to just have access to those records previously? So those are the two areas I'm interested in the history and the implications of by this language. If someone can answer that. If not, I'm happy to take that offline too. I just wanted to get it out there.
Madam Chairwoman, if I may, Matt Walker on behalf of Enterprise for the record. So a great question, Assemblywoman, and we did extensive research of the record and saw clearly there being the need for folks at the Department of Taxation and local business license to have access to these records. Again, with the spirit of the law at the time being discussed, being we're going to allow for this pass through of taxation, but after they collect the amount that they pay, they should no longer be charging these fees. And so we want the access to the records to be able to verify that. So in our conversation with Department of Taxation and the Department of Motor Vehicles, we certainly heard from them a comfort level, both with the direction of going digital and with them having adequate access. So I think that's a long-winded way of saying that I will get back to you on the Department of Public Safety end of things, but we certainly didn't intend for any restriction of access to legitimate requests of law enforcement and are happy to work with any stakeholders to follow up and ensure that the language isn't too restrictive for those purposes.
Absolutely. I would have done that myself had I read the bill previous to today. So I apologize for my delay in getting those questions to you. And then the other question that I had, if I may, Madam Chair, is just the type of data that is on these records. So is this, name and age? Is this driver's license and payment information? What kind of information is on these records that are publicly available?
Thank you for the question. Matt Walker, again, for the record on behalf of Enterprise. I'm going to phone a friend, Keith Duffy, who's the head of risk management for Enterprise, has extensive experience with the type of records we're dealing with and the volume of records that Enterprise is dealing with. So, Mr. Duffy, would you mind responding to the Assemblywoman's comment?
Yes, Keith Duffy, record with Enterprise Leasing Company. So the type of files we're seeing in the documents, they're rental contracts. They do have name. We do hide and suppress a lot of PAI, so we don't have a lot of data out on that. But with the car sales records, it does have a lot of major information that can be seen that we want to make sure it's secured and not available for anybody to obtain. So the daily rental records are very locked down. Car sales, yes, we lock them up in rooms and have everything secure. But yes, we just want to make sure we are protecting so no one can get any personal information from this that could be, put out on the web or anything else.
Was that all, Assemblywoman Peters? Did that answer your question?
Thank you, ma'am. And yes, it did, because my concern was.
Hold on, before we move on. I think Assemblywoman Peters was still speaking.
Thank you. Sorry, I was a little delayed there. The only other question that this kind of brings up for me is the online security, the digital security efforts. So I didn't see, and maybe I missed it in the bill, a requirement for the security level of that digital data is there an intention or maybe an existing requirement in law for that digital data and the security level that that'll have to meet?
Matt Walker for the record on behalf of Enterprise. Thank you, Assemblywoman Peters, for another great question. I would say that the bill mainly focuses on the provision of records to regulators in a timely manner and enables the digital storage of those records as an acceptable business practice. My brief understanding, and I'm certainly far from a data security expert, is that there are many laws and regulations on the books pertaining to all businesses and how they protect confidential, driver's license information, social security numbers, et cetera. And I would certainly expect for all of those protections to apply to this data in the same manner that they would other personal identifiable data. I will definitely follow up with you online with a more detailed answer, but certainly nothing in this bill is meant to restrict or carve out this into some sort of separate requirement. It mainly is focused on making sure that when regulators need the data, that they have ready access to it and it's provided in a timely manner.
For entertaining those questions. I appreciate the time, Chair.
Thank you. Assemblyman Ellenson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And Ms. Peters hit it right on the head. My biggest fear is personal private information that could actually come off some of this stuff. Mostly if somebody's buying a car or whatever, their social securities or everything's on their bank accounts. So I think she hit most of this, and that was my biggest concern is somebody can get a hold of this information. And if you said it was locked up in a file cabinet, I hope it's a good, secure file cabinet. So my biggest thing is security for the people, and thank you.
And Madam Chair, if I may briefly ask Mr. Duffy to respond to that in terms of, certainly as filing cabinets with that information are spread throughout the valley at the various enterprise locations, we're very concerned about physical theft and strongly believe that digital storage in a centralized, secure environment is the very best practice for that information. But I was hoping that Mr. Duffy might be able to provide some additional context either to Mr. Ellison's comment or Ms. Peters' previous comment.
Yes, please.
Keith Duffy for the record. Yes, we have locked storerooms with file cabinets, and that's what we have to secure right now because that's what the basic statute is at this time. So our goal with the online record storage is so we can actually have additional steps in place to encrypt the data, lock it up. So if someone does break into a location or, gets into the office somehow and robs the location before it's secured, than it would the paper version that is currently out there in all these locations. So that's why we are looking at doing the online or the digital storage to keep this from occurring.
Thank you for that answer. I believe the next member with a question is Assemblywoman Summers Armstrong.
Thank you, Chair Monroe Moreno. Chandra Summers Armstrong, Assembly District 6 for the record. To the presenters, Mr. Walker, when data is requested and then provided to a government agency for their review, how is Enterprise redacting that data before they send it over? Is that an electronic redaction method? Is it manual? How do you all do that now in this current day? Because my understanding is from the discussion is that right now everything is physical. They're filing cabinets with this. So how do you deal with when you're providing data as requested? Thank you.
Sure, Assemblywoman Summers Armstrong, thank you for the question. I'm going to ask Mr. Duffy to partially respond to this, but I also wanted to flag that I believe regulators from the Department of Taxation are on the line and may hopefully be able to add some additional context outside of just the enterprise business practice, but maybe more generally at how they strike the balance between records access and access to maybe unnecessary or superfluous personal identifying information. But Keith, do you have anything you can add to the Assemblywoman's question about how this works when you're providing information to a regulator, but maybe redacting the information that's sensitive and not a part of the request itself?
Keith Duffy for the record. So right now, currently, investigators will come out and they actually just ask to pull the files that we have, on base or on the location. Really, the file, truthfully, I'm not sure exactly how we're redacting all that because it is the true file that they have and it doesn't leave the premises. So I don't have any real future information on that. But unlike daily rental contracts and everything else, everything is redacted prior to sending that out, the way we print our documents and have it stored. So that is hidden and can be asked for as needed.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So if I just can ask a quick follow-up. So what you're saying is that your system already has a way of hiding some data in a printed document. So if I rent a car from Enterprise, my entire ID number is not on there, right? So the system has a way of automatically redacting some data before it even goes into a contract. Is that what I'm hearing from you?
Keith Duffy for the record. Yes, that's true. Yes, we redact driver's license, phone numbers. The only thing you see really on the contract, on a rental contract, is basically the name. And everything else is hidden or covered up. So the document and the PAI is secured.
And Madam Chair, if I may, Matt Walker for the record on behalf of Enterprise, Assemblywoman Summers Armstrong, the intent here is to provide every bit of information that we would otherwise provide in person. And so I certainly wouldn't want the record to, while we understand the question and the sensitivity of certain data and protecting that data, we certainly wouldn't want the record to reflect that we're in any way making less information available to regulators in this digital format. It is our intent to make every bit of the information that would otherwise be provided in person with physical records available digitally. I also wanted to say that there's significant ability to adopt additional regulations should certain records need to be protected or provided in some sort of alternative format, or even in some sort of alternative timeline other than 3 business days indicated in Assembly Bill 281. All of that is expressly authorized, and we would hope that regulators could dial that in should any problems arise.
Thank you, Mr. Walker. I was just asking for information about the interim as you all are transitioning to a digital format to save your data. If someone did break in, what could a nefarious person possibly get their hands on? It appears that your system is already trying to be as secure as possible, even though it has a physical form. So that's really good to know. Thank you.
Members, any other questions? All right, I am seeing none. I'd like to thank the Assemblyman for the presentation. And with no other questions, we will ask our broadcast staff if we have any callers in the queue to provide testimony in support of Assembly Bill 281.
Testify in support of Assembly Bill 281. Please press *9 now to take your place in the queue. Caller with the last 3 digits of 725. Please press *6 to unmute. Please slowly spell and state your name for the record. You'll have 2 minutes and may begin.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the committee. For the record, this is Andrew McKay, AndrewMackay. I'm the Executive Director of the Nevada Franchised Auto Dealers Association. First, let me begin by thanking Assemblyman Miller for bringing forward this bill And not to belabor the point, but I think both Mr. Walker and Mr. Duffy covered everything. I would be remiss, though, Madam Chair, members of the committee, with respect to concerns on data security. I can't obviously speak on behalf of Enterprise, but I assume as part of their operations, they utilize technology, which is commonly referred to in the industry as dealer management systems. And those are extremely robust, frankly, very expensive and technologically advanced systems where everything from putting the information on the purchase of a vehicle, the servicing is integrated into that. But most importantly, the reason why these systems oftentimes are so expensive is because of the security protocols that they put in and staying on top of all of that. So hopefully that addresses some of the questions from the committee. But again, the Franchise Auto Dealers Association greatly appreciates Mr. Miller bringing forward this bill. And as it relates specifically to Section 2, this will just improve the process significantly on multiple fronts. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. McKay, for your comments. Next caller.
Chair, we have no more callers in support of AB 281 at this time.
Thank you. Do we have anyone in the queue to offer testimony in opposition?
To testify in opposition of Assembly Bill 281, please press *9 now to take your place in the queue. Chair, we have no callers in opposition of Assembly Bill 281 at this time.
By chance, is there anyone in the queue to offer testimony in neutral?
To testify in the neutral position for Assembly Bill 281, please press *9 now to take your place in the queue. Chair, we have no callers wishing to testify in neutral.
Perfect. Thank you. Assemblyman Miller, do you have any final remarks for your co-presenters before we close the hearing?
Yes, Chair, thank you. Madam Chair, thank you. I'd like to thank you, Madam Chair, and my fellow committee members for the time and consideration today. I'd also like to thank Mr. Walker for bringing the bill to my attention and Mr. Duffy for participating in the presentation. Remember, Assembly Bill 281 updates the short-term vehicle leasing industry for the information age, both in terms of the efficiency associated with electronic record keeping and data transmission, and it recognizes the need for greater protection of consumer information from bad actors who may exploit this data to the detriment of Nevadans. I urge your support on this bill. Thank you.
Thank you, Assemblyman Miller. And with that, we will close the hearing on Assembly Bill 281, and we will open the hearing on Assembly Bill 301. And I believe Assemblyman Miller is also introducing this measure to the committee. So you can begin as soon as you are ready.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Again, for the record, I am C.H. Miller representing Assembly District 7 within Clark County. This time I'm here to present Assembly Bill 301 for the committee's consideration. As we all know too well, our state was especially hit hard by the COVID-19 pandemic. It has had a devastating effect on our economy. And according to data provided by the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics in April 2020, Nevada led the nation in unemployment at a rate of 28.2%. At that time, almost 1 out of every 3 Nevadans found themselves without work. While the situation has improved dramatically throughout the year, the November 2020 report revealed that Las Vegas, our state's largest population center, led the nation with an unemployment rate of 11.5%. And in the January 2021 report, we gained some ground, but we're still leading the nation at just over 8%, as just over 8% of Nevadans remain unemployed today. This places Nevada in the top tier of states with the highest unemployment rates nationally. The COVID-19 pandemic dealt a sharp blow to our state's ability to conduct the business of government as usual. Agencies were required to cease in-person transactions and move to remote work environments with very little notice as a matter of public health and safety. And while Nevada quickly authorized the exhaustion of rainy day funds from the account to stabilize the operation of state government, the federal government moved swiftly to get financial assistance to Americans to help us all keep our families afloat. In many cases, households that were already struggling due to strange budgets now had no option but to operate on less. And even though most were eligible for unemployment benefits, we as legislators know all too well how the Department of Education, Training, and Rehabilitation struggled to get those payments out to people who desperately needed them. Like many Americans, a significant number of Nevadans found themselves in lines at pop-up food banks picking up boxes of food they could no longer afford to purchase. I, along with other members of this committee, were out there loading these 25-pound boxes of food into the trunks of cars. It was almost a requirement to have a vehicle to even get the food, Imagine if we found ourselves here again, but someone's vehicle had been towed in the wee hours of the morning on the day they were to pick up that food. Operations at the Department of Motor Vehicles, the DMV, were no exception to the disruption this pandemic has caused. Staff from the DMV have previously described the challenges the department faced during the past year to this committee. Challenges which the DMV has since adapted to and overcome, but which may have resulted in delays to the processing of transactions for some Nevadans, including vehicle registrations. Under existing law, vehicle registrations are denoted by a license plate decal, more commonly referred to as the sticker. I'll use that term from now on. License plate stickers show the month and year during which the registration expires. These stickers may be lost, stolen, fall off license plates, be delayed due to mail delivery issues, or as a result of a state of emergency, as we've witnessed during this pandemic. For individuals who are experiencing financial instability, it may not be possible to renew a vehicle registration until shortly before it expires, which may result in a delay as the new license plate sticker is mailed. In each of these cases, vehicle owners who have renewed their registrations and paid the appropriate fees to the DMV are considered to have a current registration, even though their license plate sticker may be expired. The DMV maintains a searchable database of all registration and insurance statuses, which is accessible online using the vehicle's license plate number and the last 4 digits of the vehicle identification number. Now, on March 20, 2020, Governor Steve Sisolak issued a declaration of Emergency Directive 4, which extended a 90-day grace period to those whose vehicle registrations expired during the state of emergency and authorized the director of the DMV to extend deadlines, waive penalties, and take any other appropriate actions necessary to lessen the impact on customers consumed by the closure of the DMV's offices statewide. A grace period, which the director did extend until November 2020. Despite the grace period, in effect, pursuant to the governor's emergency directive, the DMV director's authorization, and despite the ability to look up current vehicle registration status online at any time, some Nevadans experienced situations where their vehicles were towed for displaying expired registration stickers, even though their registration was current and valid. This was happening at such a rate that the Nevada Transportation Authority, NTA, issued a letter notifying tow car operators that the agency had become aware of the practice and issued the following directive. To ensure vehicles being towed as unregistered are in fact unregistered, the NTA is requesting that tow companies verify the registration status of the vehicles in question via the Nevada DMV's website prior to towing a vehicle as unregistered. I'm quoting that directly from the NTA's notice, which is included as an exhibit for this hearing. This bill will codify this directive into statute and will require tow car operators to release the vehicle without charge to the owner if the owner is able to provide proof the vehicle was indeed registered at the time of the tow. Tow car operators are able to verify the vehicle's claim in real time using the link to the DMV's website that was provided in the NTA's letter, with just the license plate number and the last 4 digits of the vehicle identification number. The website will instantly display the vehicle's current registration status, insurance status, and the dates both were affected. This tool should completely remove the guesswork out of determining a vehicle's most up-to-date registration status. It also clearly reveals if the vehicle was towed mistakenly due to its registration. And let's face it, mistakes happen. But when it is a mistake, those vehicle owners who now have to take a portion of their day and incur additional transportation expenses to travel down to the tow yard and pick their vehicle up should not then be also required to pay fees and go through the process of filing a complaint and awaiting a hearing or review of their request by the NTA or the Justice Court to have their vehicle returned or to have their money returned. This, with times as tight as they are, many people don't have upwards of $250 or $300 to spare while they wait for a decision to get their vehicles back. Those of us that have ever experienced a period of financial instability are aware of the stress associated with budgeting and the catastrophic effect of a surprise expense. Non-consensual tolls have a disproportionately negative impact on low-income Nevadans, as many of those tolls happen in multifamily communities, such as apartment and condo communities, where many Nevadas are living with the anxiety of a possible eviction even as we speak. Someone who is out of work and barely maintaining to pay their rent and expenses, the situation many Nevadans find themselves in today, often have to make the hard decisions associated with prioritizing priorities with little resources. Decisions between paying their yearly vehicle registration or putting food on the table, paying for medications or healthcare costs, utilities, or funding other areas of necessity. This may result in having to put off renewing their vehicle registration longer than they would like. For many Nevadan families, it's been a balancing act, and the cascading effect of financial difficulties for families working with limited budgets can increase quickly once a vehicle has been towed for an expired registration. To reacquire their vehicle, owners must pay their registration fees with the addition of late fees, then go to the impound lot and pay the hook fees required by the tow operator. Again, these fees can top nearly $300 and easily be more than the cost of the vehicle's registration, even with the late fee. And that is only if the vehicle is picked up within the first 24 hours of removal. Now, if the owner is not able to pick the vehicle up for whatever reason, maybe they couldn't put the money together in that 24-hour window, they then begin to acquire daily storage fees, which could range anywhere from an additional $20 to $40 a day. You don't have to be a math scholar to understand how quickly these fees can push people to payday lenders, further increasing their financial burdens, or cause them to give up the vehicle altogether, surrendering their one asset or maybe their most valuable asset to the towing company, which then can sell the vehicle at auction. The loss of a vehicle in our state can quickly turn into the loss of a job for those that are working and live in areas that do not have reliable public transportation options. For others, loss of a primary vehicle can negatively impact the ability to even find employment, access to quality health care, education, and other necessities like that 25-pound box of food I mentioned in the midst of a pandemic. We must stop penalizing people for being poor. This bill aims to help struggling Nevadans to keep what in many cases may be the most valuable asset they own, a vehicle providing reliable at-will transportation. I want to be very clear. This bill is only intended to deal with vehicles towed based on expired registration. The amendment that will be discussed clarifies that. Chair, with your permission, I'd like to turn the remainder of the presentation over to Ms. Sophia Romero from the Legal Aid Center of Southern Nevada to review the bill and address the conceptual amendments. Following her remarks, we will be ready for questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Assemblyman Miller, and welcome to the committee, Ms. Romero. You can go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to help present here today. For the record, and as Assemblyman Miller stated, my name is Sophia Romero, and I am a staff attorney in the Consumer Rights Project at Legal Aid Center of Southern Nevada. Before I walk through the bill, I would like to thank Assemblyman Miller for bringing this very important piece of legislation. This bill will be a much needed addition to Nevada law and solves a problem we've seen quite a bit. We are all subject to having our vehicle towed, whether it be by our HOA, apartment complex, or even parking in the wrong spot at the wrong time. For some, when this occurs, it's a minor inconvenience and makes for a bad day. However, for others, it can be what sends them into an extreme financial hardship. Not having a vehicle to get to work can result in the loss of employment or turning to alternate methods such as payday loans to try to obtain emergency funds. Working at Legal Aid, I have become accustomed to having an unusual caseload. We are often people's last resort. The week before AB 301 was introduced, an applicant called seeking assistance because his car had been towed for lack of registration. This happened despite the fact that his registration was current. He filed a complaint for unlawful tow in court, showed his proof of registration at the hearing, and still lost. All because his decal was not current and despite the directive of the Nevada Transportation Authority. The letter that Assemblyman Miller read, which was dated November of 2020, and this happened just this March. Unfortunately, without any knowledge of the November 2020 letter or this pending legislation, we were forced to decline representing him. It is an extremely rare instance when we have to decline representation of somebody, but even I felt hopeless when presented with his situation. It is because of this case that I was so excited when I read AB 301 and why we were so eager to reach out to Assemblyman Miller and ask if we could help support this bill. I urge this committee to support it as well. Now I will walk through the bill. So sections 1 and 2 of the bill states that if a vehicle owner or their agent provides proof of current registration to a tow car operator, their vehicle must be released to them without charge. If the owner or their agent does not have proof of current registration and requests that a tow car operator releases their vehicle prior to removal, AB 301 sets a maximum limit of $50 to release the vehicle. And this is often commonly referred to as the off hook or drop fee. Section 2 of the bill requires owners of private property to make reasonable efforts to notify the owner of a vehicle to inform them that their vehicle will be towed, including by telephone number or electronic mail access if they have their email address available. It also requires tow car operators to independently verify the registration status of the vehicle before towing the vehicle and keeping evidence of this verification for 1 year. Any tow car operator who fails to comply with this requirement is responsible for the vehicle's removal and storage costs. Finally, AB 301 sets a maximum fee for the removal of a vehicle without valid registration at $50 and provides that the storage fees for the vehicle shall not be charged until 48 hours have passed. Again, there is a proposed conceptual amendment introduced that clarifies that the records tow car operators are required to retain, indicating they attempted to independently verify the registration status of vehicles, maybe in physical or certain electronic formats. Additionally, the amendment will extend the notification period from 48 hours to 5 days and requires notices to be affixed to the doors of residential units who have parking spaces assigned to them at a vehicle, that a vehicle may be towed from their assigned space. With that, I would just like to thank you for your time here today. And as Assemblyman Miller said, we are available for any questions you may have.
Thank you both so much for the presentation. Member, there we go, unmuted. Thank you so much for the presentation from both of you. Members, do you have questions for our presenters?
Chair,
Go ahead, Assemblyman Miller.
Thank you very much. I just want to let the members know that we have members from both the Department of Motor Vehicles and the Nevada Transportation Authority available to answer questions in those areas as well.
Thank you for that. Then we will start our questioning with Assemblyman Levitt.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm just curious, so there's a requirement to notify the person via telephone or email. Well, that seems a little difficult. I mean, if you're towing a vehicle, the tow company wouldn't even have that information, nor know how to get it. And if they had to do some sort of research, I don't know. That seems kind of cumbersome on a logistical standpoint.
Thank you for the question. Through you, Madam Chair, to Assemblyman Levitt. So the way that it works now, the property owner is to request the tow. And then the car, the notification is then placed on the vehicle. The property owner, this notification also only applies directly to vehicles that are in a designated assigned spot, where that notification can go directly to the person that is signed to the lease of that spot. So it's designed for the practice that should already be occurring are the property managers and the apartment associations complex managers are responsible for notifying the vehicle owners. That's done currently by placing a window on the vehicle. Now, in communication between the property manager or the owner of the property and the tow operator should be what vehicle is being towed and from where. If that vehicle is being towed from a designated parking space, that manager of the apartment community should have some information to access or to contact the owner of the parking space. That notification is to go to the apartment that is connected to the parking space. I hope that answers your question.
Follow up, Madam Chair.
Go ahead.
So what if, okay, so let me give you a scenario just for my own clarification. I have an apartment complex or a condo complex that has assigned parking. Somebody parks in a space that's not that doesn't have a parking placard. The person that parked there doesn't live in the apartment complex, and no one even knows where that vehicle comes from or who it belongs to. In that case, would the tow operator be able to tow that vehicle?
The tow operator, well, so the vehicle tow, the request for tow would have needed to be made by the property owner. And once that is made by the property owner, the owner is then responsible for notifying the apartment where if that space is designated. Now, if that space is not designated, then the current rule applies where they would tag the car and 48 hours later, they would then, be able to tow the car. But if the parking space is designated, then the owner of the property would have to let the apartment, the person whose space is designated to, let them know that a vehicle is being towed from their spot. For all they know, they may not know that there's a vehicle in their spot. So it could provide them some additional notice that someone is essentially stealing their parking.
Thank you for the clarification. Thank you, Madam Chair.
You're welcome. Assemblyman Wheeler.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Assemblyman, I'm reading section 1, subsection 3, and it's a little confusing to me. If a vehicle's been connected to a tow car, requested pursuant to subparagraph 2 or 3, et cetera, but they do not provide proof that the vehicle is registered pursuant to this chapter, the tow operator can only charge $50, apparently. Now, if by connected to a tow car, I would assume that means if they're still on the property, or is this after the tow truck has already towed it to the facility, maybe 20 miles away, and all they'll be able to recoup is $50? when they can't prove that that the car is registered?
Assemblyman Miller, for the record, through you, Chair, to Assemblyman Wheeler.
You can go directly to the members.
Okay, thank you. Yes, that is accurate. The maximum recoupment based on the current bill and amendment is $50. The reason for that is the vehicle registration and expired vehicle registration, especially an extended expired vehicle registration, is more likely an indication of a financial hardship. People, for the most part, don't just not register their cars, forgive me for the bad English there. And if they have the money, they will register their vehicles. So this is designed to give some relief. Now, I have been speaking with the tow operators on that particular provision, and we are looking at some solutions that will make this not so, that won't cut it down so much, but it will provide a significant, relief for those who are trying to acquire their vehicles. At the end of the day, if you have to pay your vehicle registration, the late fee, and then travel back to the tow yard to pick up your vehicle, and you're looking at now a day that could cost between $500 to $1,000. You may need some help. If you didn't have it before, you probably don't have it within the 24 hours before it starts to accrue additional expenses. And so the goal of that is to provide some relief only in specific situations where people are experiencing hardship that will allow them to retain their vehicle.
Well, I thank you for your explanation. I just have to wonder, doesn't this put a financial hardship on the tow operator if he ends up spending more for his driver, his truck, his fuel, et cetera, than the $50 that he can recoup from this? And I got to tell you, I like the purple. You kind of match your wallpaper there, buddy.
Absolutely. I'm going to receive that as a compliment. And I would just say, Assemblyman Miller, for the record, and I would just say that is exactly why I'm going to work with the tow operators to find a solution that will work for them, as well as provide relief for those people that are experiencing financial hardship. Thank you.
Thank you, Assemblyman.
Assemblyman Miller, I have a question for you. So let's say the car's at an apartment complex and they visited a friend, and the friend said, you can park in my spot because I don't have a vehicle right now. And while they're visiting that friend, someone steals the tag off their car, unbeknownst to them. Their car gets loaded on a tow truck, but all the proof of the registration is inside the car in the glove compartment. Could that be a scenario in this situation as well?
Thank you for the question, Chairman Moreno, Madam Chair. Yes, that could completely be a situation. And there's two things here that would work. So the additional notification to the door of the designated parking space would allow the apartment owner to know that their friend's vehicle is in jeopardy of being towed. It would then give them additional days to move that vehicle, get it registered, figure out what the problem is, and solve the solution before incurring additional expense. Now, if the vehicle is picked up and taken to the tow lot and they don't have, and all of the registration documents are in the car, we are also allowing for electronic proof. So we know that we get so many documents now on our phones where you can have your receipt from the DMV. In fact, the DMV's whole process now you can do online as far as your registration, and being able to show that should be sufficient evidence to get the vehicle released, especially when you consider that the tow yard has the ability to go directly to the site and verify the information that's been shown to them. Thank you.
Thank you for that. I believe our next member with a question is Assemblyman Yeager.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So Assemblyman Miller, I don't know if this question would be for you or somebody else who's on the Zoom with us, but I certainly understand what you're trying to do. I think it makes sense to give people more time before their car is towed, before they have to potentially pay all this money. But, you know, my question is really one of the philosophy of why are we towing some of these in the first place? And, you know, if you look at the mock-up amendment you provided, I'm on page 4 of the amendment, and it basically gives the situations where a vehicle can be towed. And if you look down to like line 23, parking violation, that makes sense. Line 30, if it belongs to somebody who doesn't live in the complex, makes sense to me. And then subsection 4 down below talks about if it's blocking a fire hydrant or posing an imminent threat. Makes sense. Those are public safety issues. But I guess I'm just wondering, what's the philosophy of towing a vehicle because it hasn't been registered or the registration is expired, if the vehicle is simply sitting in a lawful parking space in an apartment complex or otherwise? And I just asked that question. I know, Assemblyman Miller, you're new to the legislative process, but I wonder if anybody on the call could just shed some light into what the philosophy was for allowing that in the first place. And Madam Chair, if this is something that's more appropriate to take offline, I certainly can do my own research and look into it, but I just wanted to see if any of the experts on the Zoom would be able to address that.
And Assemblyman Yeager, if we do not have anyone on the Zoom that's able to address it, we may have someone in public comment that you can ask that question to when we go to support and opposition. There seems to be a number of people interested in this piece of legislation.
Chairman, or Chairwoman Monroe-Marino, this is David Newton from the Nevada Transportation Authority. I can shed a little light on that if you'd like me to, or if you'd like to wait until later, I can.
No, Mr. Newton, thank you so much.
Okay. Thank you again, David Newton, a commissioner with the Nevada Transportation Authority. To Assemblyman Yeager, the rationale for non-consent towing of this type is that owners of private property need to have the ability to remove abandoned vehicles from their property. And whether a vehicle is abandoned or not it's a judgment call but for the individual requesting the tow. And so oftentimes the first step in becoming aware that you have an abandoned vehicle on your property is you have a vehicle there that is not registered. And so that's the kind of the linkage for those two items. Thank you. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you, Assemblyman Yeager. Any follow-up?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate that response. That certainly makes sense. I guess not necessarily a follow-up, but I guess I just note, you know, if you have an apartment complex that has open parking spaces, that makes a lot of sense. But if you have an apartment complex where somebody's assigned a parking space or a specific set of spaces, it seems like that really wouldn't apply. I mean, if it was abandoned, then, you know, presumably the owner of the space would say, this isn't my vehicle, and tow it, which would fall under another category. So, you know, I don't really need a response to that. I'm just trying to kind of wrap my head a little bit around, you know, whether there might be additional changes at some point. And I'm not trying to do that in Assemblyman Miller's bill. But so thank you, Madam Chair, for a little bit of stream of consciousness. And thank you, Mr. Newton, for the response.
Thank you. Assemblywoman Summers Armstrong.
Thank you, Chairwoman Monroe-Moreno and Assemblyman Miller for bringing this forward. I'm just going to make a general statement and I'm going to ask my question. I just spoke over the weekend with a dear friend who is taking care of her mother out of state. And I couldn't imagine what she would be thinking or doing if her car, which she had to leave behind, to go to care for her mother who is very ill out of state and has been gone for 2 months. How she would feel if she came back and her car was towed and then sold, I think, and that's what I'm gonna get clarity on. If her apartment complex wasn't required to give her a phone call or an email, if her car was parked in her spot and her registration was expired, but she's not here. Even if she paid it online, she didn't have the tag on it because she's not here to put that tag on. So this is really something. So I have 3 really quick questions. Number 1, Assemblyman Miller, have the tow companies always have the ability to check the status of a person's registration?
Thank you for the question, Assemblyman Miller, for the record. Assemblywoman Summers Armstrong, I would, and we have Mr. Seaver here from the DMV. He would probably be able to answer that a little more clearly. But I believe that only since the online feature that we've had the ability to check that prior to. Mr. Seaver, would you like to add to that?
Sure, Madam Chair, committee members, Sean Sever from the DMV. You want JD or? Okay. Could you repeat the question for us, and I'll get somebody to answer that.
Okay, so my question is, how long have tow companies had the ability to check the status of registration on a vehicle electronically?
Well, they've been able to do that for a long time. They have an account. Do you know how long? Okay, all right.
Good afternoon, April Sanborn, Administrator of the Department of Motor Vehicles, for the record. To you, Assemblywoman Summers Armstrong. So we don't have the exact date for that information, but we will definitely get that for you. But I do know that tow companies can create an account and have been able to do that for quite some time. But we'll get the exact date as to when that started for you.
Okay, thank you very much, ma'am. Madam Chair, if I can follow with my other questions.
Could I just interrupt for just a second and ask you, we may not have the exact date, but has it been more than a year, 2 years, 3 years?
April Sanborn, Administrator of the DMV, for the record. Yes, to you, Chair Monroe Moreno. It's been many years that they've been able to do this.
Thank you. Forgive the interruption, Assemblywoman. Go ahead.
Not a problem, Chairwoman Monroe Moreno, because we're in the same direction. So to be able to have the ability to do so and then not do it because it appears to be financially in your benefit, that's concerning to me. My next question is, if someone could answer, if someone's car is towed and they file a complaint, what is the timeline for whatever government agency, I'm going to say it must be NTA, to investigate and resolve that that issue? Because I believe that hold on a second, Ms. Romero said that she had a client who came to her who said they had filed a complaint and they still lost. So if someone can please expound upon what that means.
Sophia Romero, for the record, if I am allowed, I would like to address that.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, through you to the Assemblywoman. So when a vehicle is towed, you do not go and file a complaint with like the NTA or with the tow yard. What you do is you have to file an unlawful tow complaint in justice court. So for example, this one was filed in the Las Vegas Justice Court. Then a hearing is set. There's actually a current bill pending that clarifies and shrinks the timeline for how long between the time that an unlawful tow complaint is filed and when the hearing has to be. It was a bill sponsored by Judge Zaragoza, so that is going to be updated soon. But yes, so for example, in this instance that I had, the man called after he had already gone to his hearing, and despite the fact that he showed his proof that his vehicle was registered at the time of the tow to the judge essentially said, "You don't have your sticker. They don't know it's registered. Too bad. So sad. You're out your money." And it was, about $250 to $300. And I believe that, I believe he is still seeking some type of remedy. And I referred him to the NTA to try to see if there's something they can do for him now that he is no longer able to file a court action.
Thank you, Ms. Romero. So, Chair, I have one more question. So if I'm getting the stream of consciousness correct, tow companies have a right, they have the ability to sign up for this, and they choose not to. They can tow a car that's, just because the sticker's missing, if the sticker's not there, but they could check, they choose not to, and then a person can incur these fees unnecessarily, and the justice court will not give them relief. Okay. Last question. So if the vehicle is not picked up, how long does the person have if they're fighting in justice court? How soon does this all have to happen before their car can be sold? Like how what's the clock ticking look like in this situation?
Assemblywoman, I'll take some of this. This is Assemblyman Miller for the record. Thank you for the question, Assemblywoman Summers Armstrong. So just to clarify, the tow operators do not have to sign up for this. This is accessible to anyone on the DMV's website. Under the registration tab, there's a link there that you can click to check current status. And anyone who has the VIN number, the last 4 digits of the VIN number, and the license plate number can check the status of that vehicle. Doesn't provide any personal identifiable information, just registration status and insurance status and those effective dates. As far as the timeline on recovering the vehicle, I believe, and I will ask Commissioner Newton to clarify for me, that there is, I believe, like a 96-hour window before a lien can be filed. And then there is a, I think, about 43 or so days before the vehicle can be sold at auction. Additionally, another point that you made, Assemblywoman Summers Armstrong, is there is a remedy outside, there is an additional, or I'm sorry, I think Ms. Romero mentioned this. I do believe the NTA has a solution for complaints where you can file a complaint and then there's a process of investigation and evaluation wherein the NTA can demand that the vehicle be released and, you know, if they find in the vehicle owner's favor. But I will ask Commissioner Newton from the NTA to elaborate on those points if he would. With your permission, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Assemblyman Miller got his facts pretty much in a row. That's the timeframes that are outlined in the Nevada Revised Statutes under Chapter 706. You can't initiate the lien process for 4 business days. There's a fee that then can be assessed against the registered owner on that 5th day. And then there's a second set of fees, the second half of their lien processing fees can't be attached until after 43 days. There's noticing requirements for the registered owner and any lien holder that are in that process, and that's part of what those lien fees are intended to compensate. And the other point that was raised in terms of filing a complaint with the NTA, someone who is aggrieved by their vehicle being towed can come directly to the NTA. There's kind of dual jurisdiction. They can come to the NTA or they can go to the justice court. The ability to file a complaint with the NTA is printed on each tow bill. So the individual, when they come get their car, they get the tow bill and it shows that there's a complaint process with the NTA and to contact us. In terms of timelines, it's 30 to 60 days from when we get the complaint until if a citation is issued until that citation can be heard based on noticing issues and also giving the tow company time to respond to the complaint. And Assemblyman Miller is correct. Statutorily, we have the ability to order a tow company to release a vehicle under any terms and conditions we see appropriate. And often using that particular statute, we'll order a tow company if they're found to have done the tow incorrectly to refund the tow charges. I hope that answers your question, ma'am.
Assemblywoman Summers Armstrong, any follow-up?
No, ma'am. Thank you very much, sir, Mr. Newton, for your explanation. I really appreciate it. Thank you, Assemblyman Miller, for bringing this forward.
Thank you, Assemblywoman Summers Armstrong. And I have a question. Ms. Romero, you may be able to answer it, or Mr. Newton. Let's say a vehicle is towed, the vehicle was registered. The vehicle owner has lost their job due to the pandemic or whatever else, but there's still payments due on that vehicle. They made their payment, but they don't have the money to get it out of tow, and that vehicle is sold. So who's responsible? The vehicle was registered. The tag may have been not on the vehicle for whatever reason, but there's still payments owed on that vehicle. What happens then?
Thank you, Madam Chair. For the record, Sophia Romero. Sorry, it took me a second to unmute myself. In the case where somebody's vehicle is towed and they are still making payments to the lien holder, the lender, then if they're not able to get their vehicle out, they don't have the funds. Some instances people don't even realize that their vehicle has been towed for several days, and then now, and on top of the $200 to $300 tow fee, you're getting storage charges, right? And sometimes people just don't have the money to do it, or they say the car's not worth enough. I'll just leave it there, let the tow company sell it. They put what's called a lien on it, and then that car would get sold. Hopefully, the car gets sold before the amount of the storage fees exceeds the value of what exceeds the dollar amount of what the car is actually going to get sold for. If it doesn't, that person is going to get sued twice. That person is going to get sued by their lien. Oh, I'm sorry. They have the choice to continue paying on a car they no longer own so that they don't get sued. Or what most people do is they stop paying their car note, essentially. And when they stop paying their car note, they go into default. There's no car to be repossessed and then sold at auction. So there's nothing to mitigate those damages on the part of the lender. So they will be sued for their entire balance of their car contract. And again, if somebody, their storage fees, and I believe that this is still accurate, that once the storage fees exceed the amount that the tow company is able to sell for, then they can also get sued by the tow company for the balance of what's left over to the tow company. And I may be wrong on that, but I please welcome any correction. But it's my understanding that that's the way that the statute is currently.
Thank you for that. Mr. Decker, did you have anything to add to that?
JD Decker, for the record, Chief of the Compliance Enforcement Division for Nevada DMV. Thank you, Chair Moreno. I was just going to add that the lender is often boxed out of the situation if the storage and towing fees exceed the value of the vehicle, and can also come after the vehicle owner for the remainder of the balance due on the loan as well. So it's another financial hit that is potentially out there for the owner of the vehicle that gets towed. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Decker. I appreciate that. I believe Assemblyman Ellison has a question.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Mine will be real quick. If they're calling for me in another area. Here's a question I've got. A lot of the tow truck drivers, they go by mileage and then what they pay their salaries for their employees. So if it's a $50 charge and they got to go 50 to 60 miles to get this car that's been either abandoned or marked as towed, then they'll stop taking these tow runs. And that's one of my fears. And then the other thing is, I've got a small plaza and we have people abandon their cars in there constantly. Some of them have registrations, some don't, but we mark the cars. And then after so many days, then we call for a tow truck to come and get them, hoping, because they're always usually locked up and you don't know who they are or how to get a hold of them. And the same thing with some of the small complexes, rental complexes. They tell the people to park on the street, but now the cities are putting out rules and regulations saying they can't park on the streets. So they'll pull into a parking place or a parking lot that's not marked as designated parking, and they'll leave the cars there. Next thing you know, the owner don't know who they are. They have to call and have them towed. So there's got some problems with the bill on some of these areas, but maybe you can hit on them. Thank you.
Thank you, Assemblyman Ellison. And just to be clear, none of the situations that you mentioned would be affected by this bill with the amendment. So with the amendment, it moves it to focus just on vehicles with expired registration. The remaining rules would stay in place unless that vehicle was parked in a designated parking space that was connected to a unit where the property owners, the private property owners or managers know exactly whose spot that is. In that case, the rules would change on notification and the time between the tow. But in all of the cases that you mentioned, if it was an expired registration or parked in the wrong place or abandoned, those vehicles will be able to be picked up with the remaining, with the laws as they are. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that
And I
clarification.
appreciate that for clarification. Madam, I have to sign off for a minute. Thank you.
Thank you. Just one last question. Assemblyman Miller, in your research of this bill, did you find that the apartment complexes in general have contracts with towing companies where they contract and already pay a fee for the services? So even if the car is towed, that towing company may have received some compensation just for having that contract with the rental agencies.
Thank you for the question, Madam Chair. Assemblyman Miller for the record. So in my research and working on this, I didn't find that exact situation, but I did find that tow operators and multifamily communities do have contracts that allow the tow operators to tow from those properties. From what I understand, as far as the compensation, they have the contract to tow from those properties, but they recoup the money based on actually collecting the car and the tow. I could have that wrong, but that is how I understood it currently. So if when someone else comes on, or if there's someone on the call that can clarify that, I would appreciate it as well. But that is the way that I understand it currently. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay.
Madam Chair, this is David Newton again.
Yes.
I was going to just answer a little bit of that. Again, for the record, David Newton, Commissioner with the Nevada Transportation Authority. Tow companies can have contracts with complexes to do tows, but there can be no compensation from the property owner to the tow company. Matter of fact, that's specifically outlawed under NAC 706.442. The contracts often allow for certain types of tows to be performed without a signature from the private property owner when there are safety concerns such as parking in handicap spots or blocking fire lanes, that sort of stuff. The other tows, which would be the majority of the tows we're discussing here today, are still required to have a signature from the private property owner or their designated agent in order for that vehicle to be towed. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that clarification. I truly appreciate it. I am not seeing any other questions from any other members. Oh, Assemblywoman Summers Armstrong, our last question.
Sorry, thank you so much. One question, two questions. Do we know, is there any statistical data about where most of the tows are happening within the valley? Do we have any data on that? I think that would be my question. Do we have any data?
David Newton, again, for the record, Commissioner with the Nevada Transportation Authority. The NTA does not collect any data of that type. There's nowhere that we're statutorily authorized to ask for that sort of data.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Since that was our last question on Assembly Bill 301, we will now go to testimony, and I will ask our BPS staff if we have anyone on the line to testify in support of AB 301.
Testify in support of Assembly Bill 301. Please press *9 now to take your place in the queue. Caller with the last three digits of 956. Please press *6 to unmute. Please slowly spell and state your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin.
Good afternoon, and thank you, Chair. For the record, this is Liz Davenport, LizDavenport, the legislative extern with the ACLU of Nevada. Thank you, Assemblyman Miller, for bringing this bill. Fines and fees disproportionately affect people of color, low-income communities, and immigrants. This is linked to a long history of targeted enforcement against poor people and people of color in the United States. Targeted enforcement and over-policing of minor offenses creates and exacerbates race inequality. Available surveys of towing show discriminatory impact and show that tows for minor fines and fees still occur even when a car owner arrives. For people of color and people who are low income, the consequences of a towed vehicle can be devastating because the cost and ability to get to the tow yard is out of reach and unduly burdensome for many. Therefore, the tow of a car means a near permanent loss of their car, and along with it, the loss of employment, access to education, medical care, and for some, their only shelter. Many times, the tow originates from minor offenses such as registration. The most minor reasons for a tow are some of the most common, and they have the most devastating results. According to a report on towing practices, vehicles towed for these minor fines and fees causes are 2 to 6 times more likely to be sold at a lien sale than the average towed car. We support this bill because allowing car owners to immediately resolve a tow because of the lack of registration by showing their current registration just makes common sense and can immediately provide relief that impacts people's livelihoods, the abilities to travel to job and travel to educational opportunities. Thank you, and that concludes my testimony.
Thank you so much, Ms. Davenport. BPS, do we have another caller?
Yes, we do, Chair. Caller with the last three digits of 662. Please press *6 to unmute. Please slowly spell and state your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin.
Thank you. Susie Vasquez, SUSYVASQUEZ, Executive Director of the Nevada State Apartment Association. We stand in support of AB 301 and want to thank and recognize the recent efforts to allow our tow operators access to the DMV online portal because as of last legislative session, we were not aware we could. That access is what moves us to support. We also would like to thank Assemblyman Miller for his continued efforts to understand the financial impact this bill places on our tow operators. My members depend on our tow operators to guide us through a highly regulated process to tow, and they do a great job, by the way, given the number of parking spaces under our control and documentation they collect in order to ensure the tow is legal. We can live with the requirements of the bill and proposed provisions. We don't want to see our residents towed any more than we want to see our residents evicted. We understand the impact to their ability to get to work or school and therefore make efforts to notify vehicle owners prior to approving the tow. Please understand we are following the law and are equally susceptible to code violations and fines from local government agencies where little consideration is given to the reason why that vehicle is on our property and hence need to ensure we comply with the law. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Vasquez. BPS, do we have any other callers calling in support?
Chair, we have no further callers in support of AB 301 at this time.
Thank you. Do we have any callers in opposition?
To testify in opposition of Assembly Bill 301, please press *9 now to take your place in the queue. Caller with the last three digits 434. Please press *6 to unmute. Please slowly spell and state your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin.
Thank you, Chair and members of the committee. My name is Lucas Folletta, LUCAS-FOLETTA. I represent the tow operators of Northern Nevada. I wanted to express our appreciation to the chair of the committee, to this bill sponsor for agreeing to meet with us in the last couple of days and to meet with us again going forward to work on some of these issues. We have definitely expressed an understanding of the problem he's trying to solve and also expressed a willingness to try to deal with issues that relate to this bill in a couple of areas. One is the amount of time a vehicle needs to be registered. It needs to have an expired registration before it's eligible for tow. Another is fee relief, and the other is registration verification by way of the DMV's by way of the DMV system. I think on that point in particular, it bears noting that the operators that we represent are obviously regulated entities, and the ones who are following the rules are doing the registration verifications as required by the NTA's guidance of last year. And so I don't think there's any real disagreement about whether that's a useful thing to do going forward. I think where the problem arises from our perspective is that the bill, although it is aimed at completely legitimate and reasonable objectives, from our perspective, seems to shift all the risk in this somewhat delicate system to the tow operators and doesn't address the real core issue. No doubt there are people in terrible financial situations because of COVID or other reasons who find themselves in difficult positions around this issue because of the cost of registration of a vehicle in our state. But the prescription to that problem in this bill does not address the underlying issue, which is the affordability of that registration. This is a sort of a back-end way to try to provide additional time and notice to try to avoid the tow, and then to try to limit the exposure and the financial distress that the cost of the tow puts on the person. Again, all legitimate things to discuss, but the bill as a whole shifts all of that risk to the operators, and really it will result in a breakdown of this system. As people have indicated, our operators operate at the behest of the property owners and are really trying to provide against nuisance and blight in most cases, and aren't there to pick up vehicles that are, have just missed their registration, or are vehicles for people who are in financial distress. And so we feel that the current state of law has important protections, but we are interested in working with Assemblyman Miller to strengthen them as necessary. Thank you.
Thank you. And if you have your comments in writing, you'd like to submit them, we would welcome that. BPS, do we have any other callers in opposition? And for the callers, I want to remind you that there's only 2 minutes. If you have any comments that are longer than that, please submit them in writing to our committee secretary.
For the caller with the last 3 digits of 395, please press *6 to unmute. Please slowly spell and state your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin.
Hi, my name is Brett Miller with Code Blue Towing, BRETT MILLER. I appreciate everyone's time. And I apologize, I don't usually call on these things, so I apologize if I'm not extremely etiquette as far as the process is concerned. I had a couple, I've actually got quite a few, but I'll limit it to 2 minutes. Really quick for Assemblyman Yeager, I think it was, asked about why are we towing vehicles out of residential complexes because of registration. A lot of that has to do with when registration expires, usually insurance is the next thing to go when it comes to your vehicle. So we're trying to help enforce these rules so that the management companies that oversee these complexes and the individual operators of these complexes aren't liable for a vehicle that, let's say, goes into neutral, runs over a child or a structure to where they don't have current insurance, to where the actual complex would be liable for something like that. So if we remove that vehicle before something crazy like that occurs, it definitely takes them out of the loop for any type of lawsuits. I did have a question, though, for a couple of the items. What would be the process if a vehicle has a paper plate from a dealership that has expired? You can't look that up on the DMV website because you don't have a license plate. You do have the last 4 of the VIN, but you don't have the license plate that goes with that, so you don't know if that particular item is currently registered. Also, a moving permit, you would not have any type of verification as far as a current or expired moving permit. And also, the DMV website that has been available to us since November is not available 24 hours a day. There's a lot of times that are not available to run that information before you do an actual tow. Another quick question, too, is it suggests that you put a sticker on or some sort of identification.
Mr. Miller, excuse me.
Yes.
You're at your 2 minutes. I'm so sorry. If you could submit your comments, the the remainder of what you wanted to say and the other questions you had in writing, that would be ideal. I'm so sorry that 2 minutes goes by really fast.
It sure did. Okay. Thank you for your time, though. I do appreciate it.
Next caller.
Caller with the last 3 digits of 580. Please slowly spell and state your name for the record. Please press star 6 to unmute. You will have 2 minutes and may begin.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the committee. For the record, I'm Paul Enos, E-N-O-S. I am the CEO of the Nevada Trucking Association, where we have the Nevada Towing and Recovery Council. We are in opposition to AB 301. Real quick, there are some things in the bill that we do think are good. Having a tow operator check to see that that registration is valid through the DMV, although there are definitely some issues with that website, we think it's a good thing. That would ensure that any vehicle that is registered wouldn't be towed. Over the years, we've worked to find a balance between the vehicle owners to protect them from predatory towing, requiring a wet signature from the property owner when these kind of tows are requested. And we do think if this bill was to pass in its current form, it would halt all of these kinds of tows. It would make it very difficult for those property owners to remove an abandoned vehicle from their property. There are NRS statutes that prohibit a property owner from having more than 3 unregistered vehicles on their property. So there are some reasons why we do this. I do want to say I really appreciate being able to work with the sponsor of this bill. I think we've had some really productive conversations in the last few days and hope we can keep working with them to try to achieve that balance between the property owner, the vehicle owner, and the operator. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Enos, for your comments. BPS, do we have any other callers calling in opposition?
Yes, Chair, we have one final caller in opposition for the time being.
Thank you.
Caller with the last 3 digits of 517. Please press star 6 to unmute. Please slowly spell and state your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and may begin.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. For the record, my name is Danny Thompson, D-A-N-N-Y, T-H-O-M-P-S-O-N. I represent Snap Tow in Henderson, Nevada, and Ewing Brothers Towing. We are opposed to the bill. I do want to thank Assemblyman Miller for agreeing to work with us on this bill. I think, like Mr. Eno said, there are some things in the bill that we like, but putting the onus on the tow truck driver, for instance, putting a sticker on someone's door, we would have no way to know who that person is or where they are. And putting that requirement in there is something that's impossible. And then the requirement that you could only collect $50 if the vehicle did not provide proof of registration would lead to a situation where we wouldn't be able to do these tows. You have $100 to $150,000 truck with a tow truck driver who's making upwards of $20 an hour in some cases, and you're paying for a tow yard and all the registration and all the back of the house people. There's just no way you could operate a business like that. So we would like to continue to work with the Assemblyman to see if we can't work out some of these issues that we're opposed to. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Thompson, for your comments. BPS, do we have any other callers who have joined us for opposition?
Chair, we have no more callers in opposition to AB 301 at this time.
Thank you so much. Do we have any callers for neutral testimony?
To testify in the neutral position for Assembly Bill 301, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Chair, it appears we have no one wishing to testify in neutral at this time.
Thank you so much. Assemblyman Miller, do you have any final comments or remarks before we close?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I just would like to just shed some light on the gentleman who called with a couple of the questions. As it relates to paper plates, the bill right now does not incorporate that. That would still, as I understand, would be considered a non-registered vehicle. However, we can work on that to provide extreme clarity there and possibly incorporate those vehicles as well. In closing, I'd like to thank my co-sponsors for jumping on board with support early. Ms. Romero for participating in the presentation today and the work she does to help people handle this issue every day. Assembly Bill 301, with the amendments presented today, is intended to provide an immediate remedy to those who may have their vehicle towed due to a failure to independently review registration information or simply as a mistake, and to provide owners sufficient notice and time to resolve any registration issues when they are properly parked at their home in their designated space before the removal of the vehicle and the accrual of fees. And it aims to protect those who are facing financial hardship from losing what may be the most expensive purchase of their lives. I look forward to working with the tow operators and other stakeholders to solidify solutions that will provide relief to Nevadans that find themselves in this situation. This bill does not impact any other type of tow, and it's focused on vehicles that have expired registration. Now, finally, there's an old saying, when you know better, you do better. AB 301 helps us to do better for all Nevadans. Madam Chair and fellow members of the committee, I would like to thank you for your time and urge your support of this bill. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Assemblyman Miller. And with that, we will close the hearing on Assembly Bill 301 and open our final hearing of the day, which should be pretty short, on Assembly Bill 320. This measure will be presented by another one of our committee members, Assemblyman Levin. Please begin whenever you're ready, Assemblyman Levin.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Members of the committee, for the record, I'm Assemblyman Glenn Levitt, and I am going to take these talking points and cut them in a tenth because I know we're pressed for time. So as far as the background information, this bill is to allow for off-highway vehicles, or OHVs, to operate on non-highway freeway roads in municipalities, cities, or townships that are under 25,000 people. This bill stemmed out of a group coming to me and saying, "Hey, we can't get our rhinos from the garage to the desert that's a mile and a half away without putting them on a trailer. Even if we make our OHVs street legal, there's no remedy for that at this time." So with that, the bill currently it's an amendment to NRS 490, section 1, subsection 3. A person may operate a large all-terrain vehicle in a street within the city whose population is less than 25,000, or on a portion of the highway that has been designated as a main county road. So, for example, a highway through my little town of Boulder City is now called Boulder City Parkway. And so the stretch of road that's Boulder City Parkway would be eligible. However, as the highway leads to Boulder City Parkway, and then as it exits Boulder City Parkway and continues on as a highway, would not be eligible. Subsection 3A, large all-terrain vehicles that satisfy the requirements in paragraphs A and B, which just means that they have to be street legal, meaning that they have to have turn signals, tail lights, review mirrors, side mirrors, etc., and that they are currently the requirement is that in municipalities that allow for this, they have to register with the DMV and they get a little sticker that says that they can travel on the road. Although there is a bill out there, SB 170, that would move the process from the DMV to the OHV program operated by the Department of Conservation and Natural Resources.
Lilith?
Excuse me? I will continue on because I'm almost done. subsection 3B just states the governing body of the city or the governing body of the county having jurisdiction over the street, highway, and access ordinance or resolution authorizing the operation of all large terrain vehicles in the portion of street and highways. That's actually part of the amendment, the conceptual amendment this time, which I'll go over really quick. In section 1, subsection 3, when the current language that uses the word city, the text would now read city or township, any designated city or township. And then the second conceptual amendment is to remove completely subsection 3B, in that a city or township would not have to enact any, or the county would not have to enact any laws allowing for these operations. The third is one that just came in, and it's just a clarification thing. It was somebody had asked to improve the definition of OHV and NRS 490, which I'm happy to do. That being said, quickest presentation of all time. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Assemblyman Levitt. And just so that I understand, as far as the clarification, was that the document submitted by Mr. Matthew Littner? Is that the information you're?
I believe so. Yes.
For the large terrain vehicles? And
yeah, he just asked for NRS 490 dash or dot 043 to be to give some clarification as to OHVs as an independent definition.
Okay, and I will ask our legal counsel exactly where we would be adding that to this piece of legislation before we go to questions from the committee.
Hi, this is Jessica Demmer with the LCB Legal Division. So currently, Chapter 490 does have a definition for large all-terrain vehicles. So I assume what the amendment would be to change that. I can see if I can pull up the specific number. It is NRS 490-043 is the definition. So we would have to add a new section for that.
Perfect. And Assemblyman Levitt, that is a friendly amendment.
Yes.
For your bill. Perfect. Thank you. Thank you for that clarification. And I will now go to questions from members. I believe we have Assemblyman Yeager up first.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. Thank you, Assemblyman Levitt, for your presentation. I noticed in the presentation you talked about these vehicles would need to get a sticker from the Department of Motor Vehicles to be able to operate on the highway. And I just wondered if you or DMV could illuminate on whether that, what that process would be and whether there would be a fee associated with getting that sticker.
Thank you, Assemblyman Yeager. Glenn Levitt for the record. I don't know if DMV is on this call. However, that's a process that currently exists. That's not a process that would be created. DMV already issues those stickers for off-highway vehicles, even in municipalities where they cannot operate on the road.
Okay, and so I guess I'll just clarify to be clear. I thought the presentation indicated that there would be an additional sticker, but you're saying that they already get that sticker, but as long as they have the sticker, they'd be able to travel on these roads as long as the local jurisdiction allowed it and you had a place under 25,000?
Yes, that's correct. And
okay.
And the amendment doesn't require local jurisdiction to have any part of it.
Okay, thank you for the clarification. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Assemblyman Wheeler.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Assemblyman, have you spoken to any of the sheriffs in the smaller communities about this and what their feelings are?
I have not, but I'm happy to do it.
Okay, thank you. I just assumed they would be okay with it, but I wanted to make sure.
Members, any other questions? Assemblywoman Peters.
Sorry, I missed the chat. Thank you. I was wondering about how the definition of highway fits into this. So It appears that this precludes using like state highway systems. However, when in some communities, and I'm thinking about up here in the north, there's Dayton and a couple of other communities that are directly like along the highway, and that's a major thoroughway to parts of town. So when in those cases, if one of these vehicles attempts to cross the highway, would that be allowed or not under this?
So I looked that up a little bit, and it addresses it a little bit in 490. I couldn't find exactly where at the moment that you asked the question, but as far as roadways intersecting a highway, it is addressed in 490, and I can get that language to you. So you're allowed to cross a highway in accordance with the definitions in 490. You just can't travel on them.
Yeah, I would appreciate the follow-up on that for clarification. Thank you.
Members, any other questions before we go to testimony and support? Seeing none. Thank you, Assemblyman Levin, for the presentation. And we'll go ask our BPS staff. By chance, do we have anyone on the line in queue to testify in support of Assembly Bill 320?
To testify in support of Assembly Bill 320, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Caller with the last 3 digits of 638, please press star 6 to unmute. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin. Caller with the last 3 digits, 638, please press star 6 to unmute to begin your testimony. Chair, it appears the caller is having trouble unmuting.
Let's go on to the next caller and we can come back to that one. Please.
Chair, there are no more callers in support at this time. Our previous caller has hung up the line.
Thank you. Do we have any callers in the queue to testify in opposition?
To testify in opposition of Assembly Bill 320, please press star 6. I'm sorry, excuse me. Please press star 9 to take your place in the queue. Chair, it appears we have no callers in opposition of Assembly Bill 320.
Thank you. Do we have any callers calling in for neutral?
To testify in the neutral position on Assembly Bill 320, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Caller with the last 3 digits of 467, please press star 6 to unmute. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin.
Good afternoon, Chair Monroe Moreno and members of the Assembly Committee on Growth and Infrastructure. For the record, I am Nikhil Narkade, Nikhil, last name Narkhede, manager of the Nevada Off-Highway Vehicles Program. Thank you for the opportunity to provide neutral testimony regarding Assembly Bill 320. Large all-terrain vehicles are a class of off-highway vehicle characterized by a seating for 2 abreast and a truck bed, or seating for 4+ people. Large ATVs are more commonly known as side-by-side. Please consider current Nevada statutes that enable OHV operation in communities when considering AB 320. NRS 490.090 through 490.110 govern use of off-highway vehicles on paved and gravel county roads. Existing law permits OHV use on unpaved roads under NRS 490.090 Section 3 and operation on paved roads when designated appropriately by the governing city or county under NRS 490.100. Current statute allows rural communities the flexibility to permit OHV operation on pavement. Allowing cities and counties to choose routes where OHVs are permitted caters to the needs of each community, while encouraging OHV recreation as an outdoor economy driver. Occasionally, however, the county-specific approach does create confusion for OHV riders looking to connect communities across
30
the state.
seconds.
Nevada hosts world-renowned off-road racing events statewide and is home to incredible motorized recreation opportunities near many of Nevada's rural communities. Please consider impacts to Nevada's growing outdoor recreation economy in these OHV-friendly communities when deliberating about AB 320. That concludes my testimony regarding Assembly Bill 320. I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your comments. BPS staff, do we have any other callers wishing to present testimony in the neutral?
Chair, we have no further callers in the neutral position.
Thank you so much for that. So, Assemblyman Levitt, do you have any final comments before we end?
In accordance with the quickest hearing ever, I'm going to reserve my comments. Thank you for allowing me to present to you today.
Thank you so much for presenting the bill. And with that, we will close the hearing on Assembly Bill 320. And that brings us up to the last item on our agenda, and that is public comment. So we will ask our BPS staff, do we have anyone on the line wishing to provide public comment?
To offer public comment, please press *9 now to take your place in the queue. Chair, the public comment line is open and working. However, we have no callers at this time.
Thank you so much for that. Well, members, we've heard 3 great bills today. We got out a little bit earlier than I thought we would, thanks to Assemblyman Levitt. I appreciate that. And I'm sure Assemblywoman Miller will appreciate us getting to her committee on time today. So that will bring us to the end of our agenda, and it will conclude our meeting for today. I thank all of our presenters for joining us here today, our committee broadcast staff, who is always awesome and amazing, and the members of the public who were able to join us virtually here. Our next meeting for the Assembly Committee on Growth and Infrastructure will be on Tuesday, March 30th at 1:30. I wish you all a wonderful day and a wonderful weekend.